There's a quick check off the highway not too far away from where I live. It's the only thing open 24/7 in my rural, middle-of-nowhere town. It's about a 30-minute drive if I'm speeding, which I usually am. So, to translate for all you city folk, it's basically right next door. My sleep schedule is beyond atrocious, so I've been to that quick check more than a handful of times. I like to think I'm pretty generic looking and nondescript, meaning I blend in well, but it wouldn't surprise me if some of the late-night workers recognize me by now. This happened just last week, so most of the details are still painfully fresh in my mind. It was past midnight, and I was coding on my laptop. My productivity and focus peaked between the hours of 9 p.m. and 3 a.m. So, I was in that flow state that any hard worker craves. The problem with late-night grinding is that you go from perfectly comfortable to dying of hunger in a matter of minutes, which is exactly what prompted me to shut things down and grab something to eat around the reasonable hour of 2 a.m. Just so you have an understanding of everything, I should mention that the highway leading to the quick check is more of a local road than an interstate, so it's usually pretty dead. The ride there was relatively uneventful. I pulled into the quick check, ordered a sandwich from one of the counters, and roamed the aisles while I waited. The mix of caffeine I'm usually stimmed out on and the ADHD I was born with makes it difficult for me to sit still. So, I was just kind of pacing around one of the corners of the store when I noticed something. Facing one of the refrigerators that lined the back of the store was a person sitting crisscross on the ground. It was such an odd sight that I initially overlooked it, then snapped my head back around to make sure I hadn't imagined it, and I hadn't. There was literally a person sitting on the ground at the end of the aisle, facing the refrigerator like he was examining it. I couldn't see anything other than the brown coat and jeans he was wearing. I needed to get a better look at this guy, at his face at least. So I walked a few aisles down. My plan was to turn the corner really quickly, get a good look at him, then turn back up one of the aisles, ideally before he noticed me looking. Staring at strangers so explicitly is obviously really rude, so I didn't want him to catch me doing it. I was trying to be inconspicuous about it, or at least appear like I was browsing the snacks. But I guess I didn't do a good job of that because as soon as I turned the corner to look at him, he whipped his head around and stared back at me. His movement was so abrupt that I actually froze up for a few seconds, forgetting what I was even doing there in the first place. And let me tell you, one look at this guy confirmed he was far from normal. Forget about the sitting on the ground and staring into the refrigerator. This guy was definitely on something, which I could tell from his abnormally wide eyes and the way his lip was vibrating, like it was fully quivering, almost as if he were cold, except it was actually kind of hot in there. And he was also wearing a jacket. His posture was all twisted up too, like he was straining instead of sitting, if that makes any sense. But the worst thing by far was the look he was giving me. He wasn't smiling, and he wasn't scowling either. He was staring blankly at me with this dead stare that made it kind of seem like he actually was dead. The whole scene was freaky as hell. After staring at each other for an uncomfortable amount of time, I finally averted my eyes and dipped up one of the aisles, eager to get my food and leave. It wasn't ready yet, though. I stood at the counter and waited. The anxiety was getting to me, so I angled myself to face the corner of the store where the guy had been sitting. I was half expecting him to emerge from one of the aisles, at which point I'm not sure what I would have done, but he never did. Eventually, my food was ready. I promptly left the store without another thought. I thought that was the end of it. But as I was turning to get back on the highway, I saw something move out of the corner of my eye. I glanced back towards the store and saw a person running full speed from the store entrance to the far end of the parking lot. I was already halfway onto the highway at that point, but as soon as I saw what looked like a brown coat, I knew it was him. As I drove past the quick check, I looked over at it one more time to see that guy was now jumping into a truck. I didn't even want to imagine what a guy like that could possibly be rushing to do at 2 a.m. I was just happy I had nothing to do with it. I sped off, just wanting to get home in peace. After a few minutes, the last of the fluorescent storefront lights faded into darkness behind me, and I was driving through desolate nothingness once again. I'm used to being the only car on the road when it's that late at night, which is why it was so surprising when I noticed headlights in my rearview mirror. But it was even more surprising when I realized the headlights were getting closer, meaning they were going faster than me, and I wasn't exactly driving the speed limit. My first thought was that I was about to get pulled over, so I instinctively slowed down a bit. The headlights kept approaching, and I knew what was about to happen. Police lights were about to start flashing, and my night was about to be ruined. But once the car finally got close enough, I realized it wasn't a cop. It was that guy from the quick check. It was the same car from the parking lot. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I slammed my foot back on the gas and got back up to speed. The guy behind me started flashing his lights at me and honking, and I didn't know what to do. Try and outrun him or pull over and just pray that he'd keep going. I was in a sedan and he was driving a pickup truck, so I figured I could outrun him. The faster I went, though, the more terrified I became. I can only describe that feeling as true terror, the feeling that you're literally approaching death. By the time I'd gotten up to 100 miles per hour, the voice in my head was screaming that I was going to die if I kept accelerating. I swerved into the right lane, hoping he'd shoot by me, but instead, he actually swerved to stay behind me. I started slowing down with the intention of pulling over on the shoulder, but the moment I took my foot off the gas, the truck actually rammed into me. I grabbed the wheel to stabilize the car and realized I was in a life or death situation. The guy tailing me was trying to kill me. Everything was happening so fast. I couldn't think. I knew he was going to try ramming me again. And at that speed, I knew I would be lucky not to spin out. I don't know if it was the terror or my survival instincts kicking in, but the moment I saw him go for it, I swerved to the left and slammed on the brakes. The truck shot past me, and I watched as he swerved back and forth a few times before spinning out and shooting off the highway into the field. Despite how violently my hands were shaking and how terrified I was, I forced myself to start driving again. I sped the entire way home. As soon as I got inside, I called the police and reported the incident. Although it's not like I could precisely describe where everything had gone down. They took my statement anyway, and I was happy to give it. I know for a fact that Quick Check had security cameras in their parking lot, so I'm pretty confident they'll end up catching that guy. It's only been a week since this happened, but I haven't heard anything yet. My car isn't dinged up too badly, but I still need to get it repaired. As for why in the world that guy had gone after me, your guess is as good as mine. I just hope I never see him again. This happened about 2 years ago, when my husband and I were driving cross-country, heading from Seattle down toward Central California. Although the route we had mapped out wasn't the most direct, it passed through some places my husband really wanted to visit in the Pacific Northwest. The downside of that, though, was that we'd be cutting through some pretty desolate stretches of highway. The worst part was this section of western Oregon along a remote stretch of road, miles and miles of nothing but towering evergreens and dense coastal forest. We'd been driving for most of the day, and I had fallen asleep in the passenger seat sometime around sunset. I'm one of those people who can sleep anywhere in a moving car, so I was out cold for a few hours. Around 11 at night, I woke up to the car slowing down and realized my husband had pulled into this tiny, isolated gas station tucked deep within the woods off the side of the highway. My husband said he was going to grab some snacks and fill up the tank. I figured it might have been my last chance for a while to use a real bathroom, so I got out and headed inside. I didn't bother bringing my phone or purse with me. I mean, I was just going to be in and out, so I didn't really see the need. The cashier was this older guy who didn't even look up when I walked in. The bathrooms were tucked down this narrow side hallway toward the back of the store. As I opened the women's restroom door, I almost bumped right into this woman who was coming out of one of the stalls, which wouldn't have been that noteworthy were it not for what she looked like. She had messy, unkempt gray hair that frankly looked kind of disgusting and oddly sticky. She was also wearing these foam flip-flops that made this soft slapping sound when she walked on the tile. As if that wasn't bizarre enough, what stood out the most was this thick purple and green coat she was wrapped in. Let me remind you, we were in Oregon in the middle of summer, and it was still quite warm out, probably 80 degrees. She was carrying this tied-up plastic grocery bag, and when she saw me, she just stared. Not like a normal, "oh, excuse me" kind of look, but this locked-on stare that felt weirdly expectant, like she was waiting for me to say or do something specific. I didn't know what I was expected to do, so I just gave her a polite nod and tried to step around her, but she didn't exactly rush to let me through. I figured that was the end of it, that she'd leave and I could get on with my life. But no, instead of leaving, the woman actually turned around to follow me and stepped toward the sink area. But she didn't turn on the water or look in the mirror or do any of the normal things you do at a sink. She just stood there with her arms at her sides like she was again waiting for me to do something. I was already feeling uneasy, so I went into the nearest stall and locked it. The second I sat down, I immediately regretted not bringing my phone or anything with me. I had no way to text my husband if something went wrong, and I was starting to get the feeling that something was definitely off about this woman. I sat there for what felt like a few minutes, just waiting for her to leave. Eventually, I heard the soft slap of her flip-flops moving toward the door, then the sound of the bathroom door opening and slamming shut. I waited a few extra moments to make sure she was really gone. And then I realized something. I could still hear breathing, not my own. Someone else's, coming from somewhere in the bathroom. It dawned on me that she had faked leaving. She must have opened and slammed the door to make it seem like she left, but she was still in there, standing silently somewhere near the exit, probably in the corner by the door, just out of my line of sight. I didn't move. I sat in complete silence for a really long time, trying to quiet my breathing because I was terrified at the thought of her hearing me. The whole time I kept thinking about how stupid I was for not bringing my phone. Eventually, the door was opened and closed again. The breathing stopped too, which sent a wave of relief over me. I still wasn't completely convinced, though, so I waited for another half-minute or so. Just as I was about to unlock the stall, I heard a huge gasp, like someone had just been holding their breath, followed by the bathroom door opening and closing again. That's when I truly started freaking out. That woman had pretended to leave the bathroom twice. I had absolutely no idea what she wanted, but the fact that she was playing these games with me made it clear that whatever it wasn't good. I didn't know what to do. Part of me was sure she was gone. But if she had pretended to leave twice, it wasn't crazy to assume she had done it a third time. Finally, the suspense was killing me, and I couldn't take it anymore. I unlocked the stall as quietly as I could and stepped out, fully expecting to see her standing there. But the bathroom was empty. I washed my hands as quickly as possible and stepped out of the bathroom. I had no idea where the woman had gone, or if she was waiting for me somewhere else in the store. When I got back to the main part of the store, there was this large man checking out at the counter. I lingered by one of the racks near the front until he finished his transaction and walked out. Then I used him as cover to exit the store. I figured if the woman was waiting outside, at least there would be another person around. Part of me thought I was being overly paranoid, but that thought was shattered the moment I stepped outside. As soon as I exited the store, I saw her again. She was lingering off to the side of the front entrance of the store, this time clearly glaring at me. She was holding something in her hand that I couldn't quite make out. It looked like a knife, but I wasn't sure. The way she was holding it, though, and the way she was slightly crouched, like she was preparing to spring, honestly made it seem like she was about to attack me. I prepared myself to scream or run. But instead of moving toward me, the woman quickly turned and walked around the side of the building toward the back. I ran to our car and got in as fast as I could. My husband looked confused and asked what had taken me so long. I told him I'd explain once we were back on the road. As we were pulling away, I looked back and saw the woman standing at the edge of the building, watching our car. I don't know why, but seeing her made me so unsettled. I told my husband everything, and he was understandably frustrated that I hadn't brought my phone. I will say this: I don't use roadside restrooms anymore, and I'm not in the slightest bit upset about that. This happened to me in 2024. I was 23 at the time, working for a small logistics company. My job was to deliver automotive parts between cities in the Midwest. Most of the time, it was easy work. Long drives, decent pay, and nobody breathing down my neck. But that job is also the reason I will never stop at a highway rest area after dark again. It was mid-January, freezing cold. The kind of night where even the dashboard lights feel too bright. I was driving along the I-80 heading east from Des Moines on my way to deliver a package to Davenport. The drive was about 3.5 hours. I had left around 8 p.m., and by 10:30 I was in the middle of nowhere. Just the sound of the tires on the asphalt and the occasional semi blowing by in the opposite lane. Around that time, I started to get really drowsy. My eyelids felt heavy and I could feel myself zoning out. I spotted one of those blue rest area signs and decided to pull off for a few minutes to stretch my legs and grab a drink from the vending machine. The rest stop looked completely deserted. A few dim streetlights, a small brick building with restrooms, and about a dozen parking spaces. Only one other vehicle was there, an old white van parked way off at the end of the lot. Lights off. I parked under one of the lights, locked the truck, and went inside. The men's room smelled faintly of cleaning solution and mildew. The heater was making a weird rattling noise. I washed my face with cold water to wake up, and when I looked up into the mirror, I thought I heard the door open behind me. I turned, but no one was there. I stood still for a second, just listening, but there was nothing but the hum of the heater. I figured it was just the wind and finished up quickly. When I stepped outside, I noticed something that made me stop. The white van's headlights were now on. The engine wasn't running, but the lights were on. I didn't remember hearing it start. I got this bad feeling immediately. I unlocked my truck fast, climbed in, and started the engine. I pulled out of the parking space and headed toward the exit. As I did, the van's lights suddenly shut off again. I remember thinking maybe someone was sleeping in there and just accidentally hit the lights. But as I got back on the highway, I kept checking my mirrors. For about 5 minutes, nothing happened. Then, in the distance behind me, I saw headlights. 2 small dots getting closer. It was the van. At first, I wasn't sure, but as it got closer, I could see it was the same boxy white van. No company logo, no side windows, just a dirty cargo van. It caught up to me fast and got right on my tail. I was already going about 75, but the van stayed inches behind my bumper. Then it switched lanes, sped up beside me, and matched my speed. The driver rolled down his window halfway. I could barely see his face, just a shadow and maybe a baseball cap. He motioned for me to roll mine down, but I didn't. He kept gesturing and then pointed at my truck bed like he was trying to tell me something was wrong. At first, I hesitated. Maybe one of my straps had come loose or something fell out. But then I noticed something that didn't make sense. There was nothing in the bed of the truck. It was completely empty. That's when I realized he wasn't trying to warn me. I kept driving, pretending not to notice him, but he started honking and drifting closer to my lane. I swerved slightly to keep distance, and he sped ahead, cutting in front of me. For a second, I thought he was going to slam on the brakes, but then, without warning, he veered onto the shoulder and came to a full stop. I flew past him, my heart pounding. I stayed in the fast lane, going nearly 90 now, just trying to get away. A few seconds later, I checked my mirror again. The van was back on the road. It followed me for another 20 minutes. Sometimes it would fade back until I couldn't see it. Then, out of nowhere, it would speed up again and appear right behind me. I decided I needed to stop somewhere public. The next sign said there was a truck stop 5 miles ahead. I took that exit, pulled into the lot, and parked right under a bright light near the diesel pumps. There were a few semis lined up, and I could see a few drivers inside through the windows of the diner next door. The van didn't pull in immediately. I waited maybe 2 minutes. Then it came slowly up the ramp and into the lot. I got out of my truck and headed straight into the diner. As soon as I walked in, the bell above the door rang, and the woman behind the counter looked up. I told her that a van had been following me for the last half hour, and she must have seen how shaken I was because she called over a trucker sitting at the counter. This guy stood up, huge guy, flannel shirt, gray beard. He walked outside with me, and the second we stepped out, we saw the van idling at the far end of the lot, just sitting there facing my truck. The trucker muttered something like, "Yeah, that ain't good," and told me to go back inside. He walked straight toward the van. I didn't hear what he said, but a few seconds later, the van suddenly reversed, swung around, and peeled out of the lot, heading back toward the highway. The trucker came back, shaking his head. He said there were 2 guys in there, both wearing hoodies, both just staring straight ahead, not saying a word. I stayed in that diner for almost an hour until I was sure they were gone. I finished the rest of my drive with my eyes glued to the rearview mirror. When I got back to Davenport, I parked under the hotel lights and checked my truck. Everything was fine, but there were 2 smudges on the tailgate, like someone had tried to open it with dirty hands. I quit that job a few months later. Now, every time I drive long distance, I fill up before dark, bring snacks, and I don't stop unless it's somewhere crowded and open 24 hours. Because I know for a fact, if I had rolled down that window or pulled over when they told me to, I wouldn't be here telling this story,